Let's see.
Okay, we're ready to go.
We are.
Castine Select Board to order for legal purposes. Why don't the Harbor Committee take a seat up here so we can talk to you in close proximity, and then we'll go on to other issues on our agenda. But our first issue is discussion with the Harbor Committee, CCP and Munson Group regarding the waterfront. So,
Mr. Messon as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Munson. Bring it here.
Oh, my mom brought it up. They did ninth annual one.
But no,
That was the last one.
We never made it.
Wow. Possibly mute yourself or you want
Good.
to
No. Here.
Maybe.
Well, no, he won't come up here because there's no chair up there.
Where do you guys? Well, there's more chairs.
Honestly, I did.
if you'd like to put a drawing.
I brought these in case people wanted to point, and I'm happy to leave. I think it's the town zoning map that I got offline and printed off an aerial map, so you can roll them out.
Good. All right.
So, this is Noel Musson. Was that right, Noel? Did I say it quite right?
Yes, no one must, you got it.
Thank you very much. And you have with you the members of the Harbor Committee on your left there. Stolen with impunity from everywhere.
Yeah.
And the town manager. James Derrick. And please introduce yourself a little bit more than I'm doing.
Well, all right. Well, thank you. My name is Noel Musson. I am a planning consultant. I'm based in Southwest Harbor, actually from Tremont. BI focused. We have a lot of experience in our company working with planning projects in towns along the waterfront, sort of having grown up on the coast and have an affinity for it. I actually started my career in Harpswell as the town planner, and then I worked for an engineering company for about 10 years, doing a lot of coastal permitting and project management projects, and then started the Musson Group 12-ish years ago, I think, and have worked for towns across the state of Maine. Some of the big projects we've worked on are all the planning work for or just as it was becoming a monument. So that's sort of a statewide, public process to figure out, how to manage that place. And we've worked on harbor plans for Harpswell and Belfast, Rockland, Cutler, Southwest Harbor. And one of the projects I actually brought an example of that's maybe circulating around in case anybody's interested is we're continuing to work with the city of Rockland on their downtown waterfront improvement project, which is maybe a little different than what we might be talking about here, but similar. I would think what we've found is a very good process to try to engage a multitude of different stakeholders in a conversation, consensus building process about what do we want to do. And it's kind of focused on their public water properties, but the process is very much the same. If you guys know anything about Rockland, they can be a bit salty conversation wise. So it's really been interesting to talk through. And so can Belfast. So that was always a fun one. And right now we're working on a river harbor management plan for Belfast. Potentially starting to do some work in North Haven, their waterfront, because of sea level rise and resiliency planning is really important. So I think I was talking about it, about sort of the ideas of some projects, but thought maybe we'll just have a conversation about what it is you guys are interested in or thinking about, and love to try to figure out how we can help you out, or at the very least, hopefully this will be an informative conversation that you can use in your future thinking about the waterfront.
Is there any questions?
Has the harbor committee made any progress on defining the future for the waterfront? Well, I'm just, I don't know where you are in the process, that's all why I'm asking the question.
Well, so, I think pragmatically, we are at a point where we are revising the RFP that would then start to look at the town-owned facility down on the waterfront. And so Derek is hoping to finish up those revisions with some input. And I think we're very close, Derek, based on the inputs that I've received, which is A-OK. So we have, and perhaps you're familiar with the grant that we're applying for. Which is is that state funding, Derek?
Yes.
For resilience and of state-owned or municipal-owned property. So it's a $50,000 grant.
So is this the GoPIP grant, or is this a Shore and Harbor planning grant, or?
It's the, oh, go ahead.
Well, it's a planning grant, and I think we already have that.
Yeah.
That grant, you know, applying for it.
Yeah, it's a DOT, main DOT infrastructure adaptation fund grant.
Okay,
Yeah, so we've been awarded it and now we are seeking people that can address the concerns.
okay.
I think that's the status.
Could I just
Yeah, go ahead.
have a question?
Yeah.
So if Castine just came to you
Yeah,
and said, you know, we know we want to do something,
sure.
we don't know what we want to do. We would love your input and your experience, like, what does something like that cost to come in and just say, I'm just saying, like, here are some options, like, for, because at this point, we have no idea, I mean, we know it's gonna be big numbers to do it, but we don't know how big or, and so I'm just curious how you go about even approaching a project like this.
Yeah, I think that normally, so I'm put my. Well, let's talk about process and then cost.
Okay.
So like normally what I would say is, and I'm just sort of walking into this conversation cold.
Yeah.
And I always say, I like to think about projects as sort of like an upside down triangle. So like we're starting off at the widest part of the triangle and then working to a site specific thing. So my suggestion is always like, let's go forward with a planning process, that is basically kind of broad consensus building, envisioning, if you will, so that you can really think about, okay, here's how the waterfront's all gonna play out in big picture ideas. Like we'd like to do kind of, these are some ideas here, these are some things that we want to do here. Here's some resiliency thinking that we need to kind of bring into the picture so we know where the risks are, and the threats. So you have identified all those things, so you're kind of doing like a vulnerability assessment and visioning session kind of plan at the same time. So that's like the first step. And that involves like, public meetings and meetings with the harbor committee and folks that really know much more about the waterfront than I will ever know, we start to get into it a little bit. I mean, just talking about like, how do you see this playing out? Where are the challenges that you have? They're not just like physical challenges, but like other things that you. And then I'd start to kind of iron it, hone it in. So say, great, we kind of have this vision for what we want to do. And then there's the private sector side kind of needs to kind of be weighed in there. But is there regulatory structures that we need kind of massage to make it easier for that to happen, or, guided in that way? But more like, okay, now as a municipality, what are the tools that we have in our toolkit that we can use to help implement that vision? And that could be like honing in on the public doc and saying, okay, here's what we need to do here. And there's a little bit more detail that kind of comes in from that point. And then you kind of work your way down. So like what we're doing in Rockland, we actually, this is exactly how I've done this in a few different towns. So in Rockland, we did exactly that. We did like a broader visioning and roadmap. We got identified all the stakeholders, or I guess partners that needed to be involved in the conversation. We came up with a vision, and then the next step in the process was, okay, we need to do these things. And so that's where we took that vision to a more detailed planning process with landscape architects and engineers to try to hone in, like, here's a concept that we can do, some cost estimates, here's a bunch of grant sources that you can go for. And now we're into the actual, like, here's an engineered drawings and set of plans that could go out to bid, and that would help with like other sources of grant funding, like if you're gonna go for like some FEMA funds or some other type of funds that like ship grants, sometimes you really need like shovel ready style projects, and so we're at that point now. So what would something like that cost? I knew you were gonna ask this question, and it's really hard to say, but I think the way I like to try to do it is to say, if you can break these phases down into smaller chunks, then it's less likely for me to say, well, like, the Rockland project, we're upwards of, a couple $100,000 at this point. But that means that the first phase was close to the $50,000 phase, and the second phase was a little different. So you start to scope the project based on, how much you actually have available and what we think we can bring to that time. But I think a $50,000 like starting point is a good starting point.
The third piece there is timeline.
Yeah.
So how long does this process?
Well, the planning process that we did in Rockland was probably 12 months, the beginning phase, and then but we also like to understand, like, hey, we're really shooting for, so again, not knowing anything about where you guys are, but if you know that something needs to happen at the town facility, then you could start to integrate like expedited, that's gonna come to the forefront, so you could start to integrate thoughts on that process a little sooner than you might like the rest of the waterfront.
And as Rockland did this project, where did most of the money come from?
Some of it always has to come from the municipality, because there's matching funds. Some of it came from, like the GoPIF funds, if you haven't really done it, it's like, that's a lot of resiliency money that's happening now. To work with Hancock County, maybe on signing up. Are you guys part of that program? If you're not, should be.
The community resilience.
Yeah.
We're
Great, and so some of that funds comes in, I think we did have, I wrote a grant for Rockland for the state's Shore Harbor Treatment Grant, which is part of the Maine Coastal Program.
Do you do a lot of grant writing?
Yeah. Yep. That's all part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we like so for me, I'm a planner, so sometimes people think about planners are like, here we go. Bunch of plans, but I like the plans that are basically like, here's this big vision, and now let's figure out how to get the vision built. I always say, like, I have 3 daughters. I love to drive around the state and be able to say, hey, we worked on that project, or we worked on that project, but it's something you can actually see. Sometimes it's helpful in the context of a lot of the work that we do, which is very like behind the scenes. So plans not on the shelf, that's a good thing.
But I mean, of course, the Harbor Committee does Castine BOS, the whole coast.
Yep.
And I guess, one of the things that I would challenge you to do is, what could Castine offer that other towns can in terms of a harbor? And I'm gonna just use this as an example. Last week, one of the schooners was in town.
Yeah.
And I happened to speak to the captain, and I said, well, tell me, what places do you like to go up and down the coast? He's like when you're sailing around, do you have an itinerary, or how do you work it? He says, oh, Castine is our favorite.
Yeah.
And he said it would be even more of a favor if we had a few more amenities.
Sure.
But he said, like, in a microsecond, so I just think that it's not just, I think we have something unique here.
Yep.
And that's why we're all here, but like, how do we really build on that unique thing and
Yeah, I think that's part of the planning process, though, is really identifying, like, here's what we all think here's the strengths that we think we have, and then here are the weaknesses that we can identify, and how does that relate to the water?
Do any of the towns you work with ever have like private funding channels where they'll have a thermometer out in the dock, help build our dock? Like, I'm just curious, like how you know, how creative people get in raising money.
Yeah, I haven't done that specifically for like coastal projects, but that's not to say that it couldn't happen. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with how much your community really supports, you know, that initiative versus some other things, but I think that's a great idea. You know, that's all part of, when we come up with a project, sort of the broad sense, there's a bit of a roadmap that comes with that. And that's all part of it, like, you know, local funds, what are some tools that we can think about to help raise local funds? You know, outside of the, you know, everybody's concerned with, you know, changing property taxes, and that's how we all pay for things around here in Maine. But there's a lot of other ways to think about it. Yeah.
So you mentioned, all the key things in my mind: resilience, climate change, preparing, getting us ready for bigger storms, better storms, not better storms, but worse storms. And you also, and you talked about the dock. My understanding was that, the community partners group was looking at even sort of a bigger, more expansive project. That I'm throwing stuff out that I don't really know, but it might include something like somehow connecting the town dock area with almost the yacht club, like, you know, being able to get down there or something.
Sure.
So do you often work on projects, I guess my question is, that have phases, like phase one could be this, phase two could be,
Yeah, yes,
like,
all the time.
that's all the time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess what I was suggesting is, you know, to that degree, at least based on some of the conversations that we had, that the first phase might be that sort of big picture thinking, like, here's our waterfront, if you know, there's a lot more waterfront, but this is the area that we're really focusing on. And, you know, these are the mapping part is kind of the easy part to be able to say, we already know kind of, we can lay out in a map for you where the sea level rise projections are, and these are the ones that are, you know, what the state says you should really be thinking about. And then we can start to have some conversations about, like, we've, through this Rockland project, we kind of came up with this term flexible resiliency. So like, how do we think about resiliency in a way that isn't like, boy, we know we have to start thinking about this level, but our municipal investment is, you know, here, and the lifespan of that thing that we're buying is only like this far. So how do we start to think about those things? But I would maybe think text, and again, sort of the planning mind, which is like, boy, we want to make a connection. Here's what the yacht club has to offer, for example, and we know that one of the weaknesses is the connection between this point and that point, and how do we start to think about that? And then eventually, maybe that becomes a separate project, whereas the town dock becomes a separate project, and you're kind of taking the master plan and breaking it into chunks that you can actually handle. So, yes. But I think, I always say, like, the master plan part is so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot by making investments that are not thought through all the way. And then you're kind of stuck with what you have because you didn't think a little bit farther in advance. And then the thinking is big picture thinking. It's not like specifics, you know, the specifics will come when we say, okay, well, we know we need to do, this is an area that's gonna be a problem. We know we're gonna have to do something to be more resilient, but I think we need to, here's some options, but maybe the solution comes at a more specific time in a project. Otherwise, it just get bogged down and like, well, we can't, you know, raise this facility so high because the costs are gonna be this or that. So I think we need to work through that later. And then the other thing I would add, and then I'll keep talking and answer questions, but you know, this is a project along the waterfront that deals with a lot of different players and then a lot of different scenarios, and the answers are gonna be kind of hard to figure out. There's like, it's gonna be really hard to just, I'm not gonna, like, if you were to say, hey, no, we really need you to help us with a comp plan, and we don't want any part of it, we just want you to come back and write the whole document and then give us a finished product. Like, I guarantee you I could come back with a comprehensive plan that had a lot of the same language that a lot of towns have, and people be like, yeah, that sounds about right. And so forget about like the buy-in part, but like so you could do that in certain projects, like a comp plan, but like a harbor plan in this context is much more difficult to just have some random person come in and say, this is what you need to do. Like, there's a lot more to it than that. That comes I'd say, from the process.
I appreciate your concern about stakeholders and bringing all of our stakeholders together
Yeah.
to discuss this, because it's very complicated and very layered and
And emotional,
very.
yeah, so process is more important than product in a lot of times, so, yeah.
And
I was just gonna comment that the harbor committee has done a lot of discussion about what we should be doing and where we should be going. And I think where we're at now is we really need a sanity check to say, are we considering all of the things that we should be considering? And making sure that we don't do one thing that looks like it's gonna do really great things, but it impacts some other things down the road that would be a problem. And the idea of having someone such as yourself, Noel, who can come in and take a look at it and say, have you thought about this? Or, there's something else going on here, that we should be looking at. And I think we've got a reasonable understanding of what's going on, but we really can use some help to look at the big picture, and then we can pick out the small issues within that big picture
Right,
and hopefully sequence them properly.
Yeah.
So that it all comes together.
yeah, I would say you have that big picture and then you prioritize the things in that big picture that need to get implemented. Yeah, they're probably, some of them are small and some of them are probably not small, but some big thing, some big high priority might be an actual big thing.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we do that all the time.
Some are evolving.
Yeah,
So there are agents that are already acting in the harbor.
yeah,
Namely the academy, to build structure that is going to impact the harbor.
yep,
And we're unsure how that is going to be a real world effect. So
Yep.
we have some time to buy.
Yeah.
In order to make decisions based on.
okay. Yeah, I actually saw the plans online. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't know what outreach the harbor committee's done, except for having good thoughtful discussions with open public meetings, but like sometimes. It's just nice to say, here's our thinking. And now let's go test the waters in a larger public, a larger process. That allows for that type of dialogue to happen.
One specific question, do you do public engagements, bring all together to
Yeah,
stakeholders? and
that's like-
That's your thing, that's what
that's
you
what
do.
we do, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yep, so in a project like this, I would say it's nice, I have. Some team members that I probably would have as part of the team, like a landscape architect that is really good at public process, not just like designing. Somebody's garden. There's some engineering technology, engineering experience, it's kind of helpful sometimes depending on where we are, so. There's people that I like to have as part of my team that could be really helpful in.
so,
these types of-
so in terms of like, if we were gonna do like, we're at the beginning of the beginning.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a public engagement just to start a conversation.
Yeah,
Like, can the town pay you just to do that while we're applying for grants and raising money? I mean, like, do you need a bigger project just to go to the start?
nope,
I think we have this RFP going in.
Right,
That will end up hiring someone
right,
to help us with planning. So,
Right.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you guys said, hey, I really need to hire you to do. This one thing, I'm happy to help you with that. I would say there's probably some, upfront planning,
Yeah.
we see where that, to lead up to a public meeting, like what is the point of this public meeting, what do we hope to get out of it?
I mean, my, this is just my feeling, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm. In the town. To see the waterfront be improved.
Yeah,
Of course, there's gonna be a lot of different opinions, but I think that if you say, oh, do we need a better waterfront? I would say that the consensus would be yes.
yeah, I mean, it's such an important part of a lot of communities like this and. Definitely diversity of opinions on sort of what the best. Foot forward is, I guess. But yeah, I'm always really interested, having kind of grown up on the water and see how things change, and I think, you know, even with towns like Southwest Harbor, if you're not that familiar with it, I mean, the water is so connected, but the town is a little bit farther away, but how do we make better connections, or I do a lot of work in Northeast Harbor too, and that's another kind of interesting sort of, you know, connectivity to the downtown. How does the marina and the waterfront really facilitate, you know, what's there, what needs to be improved or added, what amenities are missing?
Well, I don't wanna lose track of the fact that there's an urgency to also. Well, not urgency, but there's a timeline associated with this RFP that also then builds upon further funding that is already coming to the town.
Great.
And there needs to be some immediate plan to address the risks that we suffered in January last year. So that we're not losing assets that we've invested in already.
Yep.
And so it is a real jump forward and back.
Yep.
You know, to the present and then forward.
Yeah,
Constantly.
Yep.
And I think the town wants to see an effort to protect what's there so that we're not exposing ourselves because we're delaying the process about the plan.
yeah, well, I think, you know, so you guys are just finishing an update to your comp plan, right? And so in the context of updating the comp plan, I don't know how many years or months it went on, but usually they're long, it's a struggle. And you still go through public process and things are happening policy wise in your town. You know, while you're doing a master plan, if you will, and so I think that's pretty natural, like you can't stop life from happening while you're, you know, doing some of the forward thinking that you need to do as well. So I think there's a way to make that sync up, or maybe it's how you scale the thing that you're talking about so that it doesn't go too far. I'm only guessing because I haven't really put any thought into it, but
No,
here are the must do's, and then here are the things that, you know, maybe we wanna wait a little bit on until we get a better sense of bigger picture. I don't know. But I think that's possible, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, Rockland, for example, was working on their fish pier at the same time we were going through a large waterfront planning process. So it is there, and that facility needed to be updated and repaired. And that was happening while we were doing these.
I asked a question probably of the harbor committee people, so the one thing that I was thinking about this weekend that I wanted to put in for discussion today was. So I believe we have a second grant that's the impact of the MMA dock, is that correct? Like $500,000 or something like that, right? So. A quarter, oh, okay, alright, well, I'm wishful thinking, I guess. So, the one thing I noticed in our grant for this $50,000, I didn't even mention that expansion. And I'm wondering if, since that's gonna be out, what is it, 200 feet or?
30 feet.
30 feet.
130 feet further, is that gonna change like the wave action that comes in, is that something that we should actually mention in this $50,000 grant, that we also have that coming? So whatever's recommended realizes, is that gonna be a bigger barrier, let's say, to the wave action coming in on the town dock? I know everybody's worried about navigation and stuff. But what about the actual, like, storm surges or wave action or anything else?
There
And should
wouldn't
that be
be,
something they look at?
If the weather was the same as January, it wasn't going to change.
Okay, alright, that's, so you don't think that's relevant?
I think it's important to
Like,
put in,
put it in
because
there
that's
just
part
so
of the
they're
planning
aware of it,
process.
right, yeah.
If they're not looking at what's happening in the,
Yeah.
as a contractor, what's the changes in our harbor, and that includes the MMA pier.
Yeah,
We're
right.
doing ourselves a disservice by not including that, so
Okay.
I think, thank you, Derek, that's a
Yeah.
very important thing to.
Yeah, I just realized like this weekend, I'm like, what is missing? There's some piece missing in this when I was looking at it again, I'm like, it's the MMA dock, is it gonna be where it is? We talked, or we haven't really alluded to, they're gonna do some improvements. And of course, I figured it'd come up during the discussions, but I think the consultant should know that right up front.
They are putting in a way to turn on the west side, right?
Okay,
So, and I don't think it'd be possible to put one on the east side.
okay.
No, but it will help if there is, if there's.
I think there's possibility off the middle ground to do anything we wanted, really. I mean, that's, the exposure is Smith Cove and that easterly. And so those are non-navigable areas and the wave deterrent would be. So down the long-term plan, I think there's certainly room for that conversation.
Anybody, anything else?
Can I ask, how did you get here?
How did I get here?
Yeah, how did you get involved here today?
Well, I was talking to these lovely folks back here very briefly, and I don't know exactly how you got my name, but that's.
I called, we were looking for people that might help us do a broad range plan for the waterfront. And so I looked up in the, looked at some, I guess it was Port Clyde that had your name on it. And I just called him and it sounded like it would be a good start to start to talk to people about how they might help us. And he lives right in West Harbor or Tremont or wherever, so. And has done a lot of work in this area, so.
Yeah, we looked at 4 or 5 others, and this is the one that sort of bubbled to the surface in terms of the work that's been done and what seems to be the work that needs to be done here. So it's not imposing anybody on the town. We just thought it would be helpful to start that conversation.
We obviously as Castine Community Partners. It's just.
Just curious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm happy, I said, I'm happy to have a conversation about things like this, all the time. I find it really interesting, and I think it's something that communities struggle with to figure out, like, we know what we need to do here. And we have some sense of, all these other things that need to happen, but it's really like, kind of, how do you think about it, holistically? And we've done it a bunch of
And
times.
also having someone come in who's done this in other small towns.
Yeah,
You mean, I'm sure that everyone you do, the mistakes you made in the first one, you don't make in the second one
Yeah,
and so on.
yeah. But every town is different too. I mean, I'd say the sort of the overarching process is pretty, the way I like to approach things is the same, but, once you get into it, every harbor committee is different, every town that you're dealing with is different in a way. And so we might even get into this and sort of massage the process as we go, to kind of respond to how things are happening. There's some lessons that we can bring from other communities to say, like, we considered this exact same issue here, and this is how they dealt with it, but you might want to do it slightly differently or whatever, like, all that's going to come into play. And again, like Port Clyde, so that was a project that we started working with the town a long time ago. And then I wrote a shore and harbor planning grant for them, and we did an actual bigger plan. Then we focused in on this one site, then the town ended up buying, they had this one small J-Dog, in Port Clyde for a long time. And they ended up buying the facility next door, which was a working, waterfront facility, which was part of the plan that we came up with. And now they're like, hey, we really need to do something here, but we actually took that, got a couple more funding sources, and then came up with a plan to like basically make a bigger facility. So there was like, then I got into all the permitting, so we did all the NRPA permits and we filled in, a bunch of coastal wetland. I'm sure you guys are familiar with how fun that can be, trying to work through. And now we're into the construction phase, and so I actually wrote an EDA grant. It's like $4.5 million project for them to fund that project. And now doing some grant administration on that as well. So it's kind of
What's your success rate in getting grants?
We've just been pretty successful in getting grants. I think most of the time, you're working the system, not working the system, but you're interacting with people ahead of time. And usually have a pretty good sense, like, this is the thing that, this is a thing that's gonna get funded before you even spend a lot of time kind of working on the grant. So it's not oftentimes that we're just sort of like roll the dice and see what happens. With the EDA, I mean, we had meetings with the EDA a lot before we even applied, and we had them help us figure out like, okay, which funding source do we actually want to apply to? So we started off on one track. And then COVID happened and there was some tourism funding that got there and the EDA representative was like, you know what? Maybe this isn't a public facilities EDA grant. Let's try this as the tourism angle because you're going to be competing with all these other public facilities, but tourism, we made the link there. So a lot of it is like, you know, how creative you can get in working with people that are.
And understanding the landscape.
Exactly.
Funding landscape.
Yeah. You know, there's resiliency funds are big right now, so that's huge pot of money. Shore and harbor projects, which you guys are probably also familiar with through DOT, like you have to get into the queue for those things, so those are a little farther out. I usually like to reserve those for the construction stuff. But
Well, which is the kind of planning we're thinking of too, because we have a term life on our bulkhead and we have, you know, expectations down the road that we have to plan.
yeah, and I found it really interesting to think about that kind of thing where you say, look, I mean, here's what this sea level rise is saying for X number of years. But if we did this to plan for this thing that's say 50 years out or 80 years out or whatever it is, you know, here's where this elevation point is going to be so high, it's just not practical at this point. So how do we build that in a way that allows you to build on that? And that's one of the things that we're doing about putting on their seawall is it's more, that's where the flexible resiliency comes in. So we're not building it, you know, so high to meet, you know, the far extreme of the.
So you want it on a beautiful day like this weekend when it was closed because the tides were too high.
Exactly. So yes, but we want it to be high enough for, you know, the 50-year projection as opposed to the 100 years. But also you don't want to invest all that money and then have to redo it again, even 50 years from now, you want to like set a foundation for success. I don't know what that technically looks like for anywhere around here, but that's how we started looking at it. And I think anything on the waterfront is gonna, you know, this is one of the things that I think we're gonna struggle with at a place like North Haven. Is like such an important harbor and everything is sort of within the, you know, the flood zone and the sea level rise projections, but how do you can't just raise grade everywhere, you know? So that's something to kind of work through. And then we had to do that model too, because there's a, you know, in between the public properties, there's actually a private property. So if you built a park here where the grade works, and then you do something over here where the grade works, then you've got this other property that's dipped down. So how do we engage with that property owner to like do something that works together? And obviously the private property owners have to kind of buy into the whole discussion. And that's part of it, but it's a challenge. It's really a challenge, but it's interesting and important.
Sounds like that's gotta be similar to us also, though. You know, while we are solid, we do have the private ones on the edges, on the edge.
Yeah, I mean,
Where we are. Yeah, Port Clyde, I'm guessing with the fire they had, that must have changed some of their perspective on some of the stuff, like they didn't have the building on one of the piers there or anything else now, or maybe they're rebuilding it.
they're gonna rebuild, so we worked for the town, so the store that burned was private, and then the next. To where the Monhegan, the ferry was, that was private, and the town owns sort of on the, if you're looking at the water, it's on the right hand side. So there were no structures on that
Oh, okay.
property, those were taken down well before the fire. I think it did change perspectives in a way, I know there's gonna be a bunch of rebuilding, but even that is a really interesting area because, you know. How resilient, when we started the planning process there, you know, resiliency is something we had to think about, but not even to the degree that people are thinking about it today. So it's kind of interesting to see how the property owners are gonna respond with what they're doing, and then there's just that one main road that kind of goes into Port Clyde, that's all you get, so what are we gonna do with that? How does that affect, you know, the rest of the shoreline? There's a lot of coordination with DOT, CNP down there.
Liz, you got
I just wanted to kind of clarify philosophically why Castine Community Partners is so interested in this, and I'm looking at that, a year-round thriving community, and that's why Castine Community Partners was formed about 10 or 15 years ago to build a private funding group that could help the town do some of the projects to enhance the economic development around here, for one thing. And to do housing, and it's a very broad mission. But I think we're here because we're just interested in looking at the whole town and really want to help. And we can help by raising money sometimes, we can help by our connections or our facilitation with the town residents. So we're just an adjunct to help the town, is what we really are here for.
I, thank you. And thank you to everyone for being here this morning. I want to be mindful. I know Xander's giving up a portion of his academic day. And Scott's giving up a portion of his work day. So, and Noel is giving up part of his work day. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I personally really appreciate everyone being here today. And thank you all so much.
Yeah, this has been very informative, and I think that we've got a pace to go from now that perhaps we didn't before.
Great, well,
Good information.
happy to be here.
Okay.
Let me know if there's anything else you need, if I can answer any other questions or.
Thank you, I think you'll be seeing us again.
Excellent. That's encouraging.
We appreciate you coming, Chair.
No, it's my pleasure. Happy to make the drive. If you guys want, you know, but I'm gonna, I'll leave this. I don't need to figure that now, this would be like, you're interested, this is a pretty good skill. I don't know if you thought of it. I printed that off,
Thank you.
and don't be scared to draw on these.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Noel.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Xander. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. That was very helpful, I think. Okay. Next item on our agenda is water committee, the committee appointment. We do have an application for an alternate, yes. And we did not take an action, but we probably should.
But we can't do it today because it's.
Right.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a discussion whether there's anything that we need to investigate or anything.
He just left. I was hoping you would stay, but
Yeah.
but it sounds like you have experience in working on refurbishing and maintaining at least a private water plant dock. So and he's very interested in starting to work with the community. So I think that's great for someone who's a little bit newer to the community.
Yeah.
We can address it in the next.
We can, well,
We'll put in.
we'll put it on for the next,
Thank you.
and
Okay.
very good. We have board and committee policy.
Right,
We have that,
okay,
what looks to be,
Yeah, I read through it too.
yeah. And it looks like our changes were made and
Yeah.
so we can.
Yeah, the lawyers actually, got a hold of it and, didn't really change much in substance, just some wording over there.
the one that Sue included in our packet this morning, is that? the
That
one?
is, you'll see that, I know it is because it says Title 1, 401, 521, and I just originally used 401 X, SEQ. And so they changed it,
Okay.
right, so this is the up-to-date one,
This looks
And
really
it's
good.
and it's great because it's been started being reviewed by the attorney.
yeah.
So we can
Yeah.
take action on that at our board meeting next.
Which apparently is October 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, I didn't want those, not my calendar.
Okay, and we have the language for the referendum on November 5th. Which was also in our packet this morning. And I had seen it before and I saw nothing that needed to be changed. Did anyone else?
Only number three, you need to come up with a dollar value for that position, which is only gonna be about 6 months a year or so.
Oh,
I-
they had it.
And
Karen has it.
yeah, but I know that that's what needs to go in there, so
To go in there.
I think. Karen mentioned $28 an hour or something, but for 6 months, so I'm wondering, cause did you say 30, you know, how many hours a
So
week?
what we sat down with Karen last week,
Yeah,
and she worked out the dollar amount.
well, we wanna talk to her and have you guys approve that.
So the
Yeah,
dollar,
actually,
so let's talk about
because-
this a
right.
little more, so the dollar amount that we came up with was, 18,500
That's close.
and social security.
Right.
And then one of the questions that's come up in conversations around community is we also had a little, or there's a section there for 5,000 in expenses.
Yeah.
And people are asking, well, what would that be used for? What would that look like? So we might need to think about that a little bit. And then again, where we had the little section about in 2025, 2026 budget. It would be roughly $40,000 for pay and social security. And then a $40,000 operating budget, and so again, what would that be used for? And then another question that came up was, does this mean we're still giving $12,000 to the visitor center? Or are we backing off on that, you know, like, so these are some things that, and I think some of this. We have time, we can figure out for May, but like the visitor center, we can do that during budget. But yeah, I guess coming up with some tangible things that $5,000 might be good for.
I mean,
or
so-
used for.
I just think, I don't think we wanna like nail it down, but it could be organizing events. But if say that there was an interesting speaker that would draw people to town, we were gonna do something on the waterfront and they needed to advertise it.
Okay.
I would say,
Okay,
and I would think that we could, since we don't know, once the person gets in, we don't know how they're gonna operate, and I think that we could say something that before that money is spent, they have to come to the select board for approval, so that's not, so that it's being controlled.
okay. And so we could say for the, on here, part-time for the remainder of the fiscal year. If it was 18,500, and you guys are making me do math, if it was 18,500 and $5,000, it's 23,500. So we could say that.
The only problem I have with question 3 is the note.
No,
And the note,
Right,
recommend.
the note should, I think, say something if this one is approved.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah, I like that. If approved,
yeah, because this, the way it's written suggests that no matter what, we're gonna put it in the
Right.
budget.
right, so I agree with Gordon. If approved, FY 2025, 2026.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
can I say something also, Gordon? So I don't know, like, what we give the visitor center for money, but I think that if that is for people that are calling up for information, where do I stay, what's going on? That I think is gonna be a totally different
Yeah.
mission that should stay, that is not an economic development, that's a promotion thing. You do not want this person wasting a lot of time.
Right.
That they will with other, like, new businesses, business plans, stuff like that, or directing people on, where to go for that type of stuff. And but I think also part of the money that will go. This person's not gonna be sitting in this office constantly. I need this person to go to anything that's economic development, anything that's housing related. I may go to some of those things too, but I'm looking at that person will also do a lot of those things that I would try to do. And then they can give me the synopsis of, all right, this is what we found in the 8-hour day. But that way, they need to make connections to like community development block grant people, HUD officials. They need to almost be on a first name basis, because that is the key, I think, to a lot of community and economic development successes. having that relationship, those players that are at those conferences, whether it's Grow Smart Maine, you know, all these different agencies. They know that person is a Castine economic development person.
So then
And they
let's,
see it, and I do it as a hobby, I can't go to all those, but I might go to the most important annual ones. But having that connection of where they know the people on a first name basis is the key, so right in the door, they don't start talking, well, let me tell you about. This little part, Erica, that, they already know that person knows that.
I'm just gonna say, even take that a step further, that person should know, like, all of the people at the banks, you know, banks do a lot of community development, like, all the local banks, you know, all the, state association, you know, the Maine Community Foundation might have, I mean, who knows?
Mhm.
okay, so then I would say on the sheet that we've drawn up, that's sort of like a job description.
Yeah,
We should add some of that to the first bullet point, assisting the town manager with grant writing opportunities.
yeah,
And we should add to that, grant writing opportunities,
Seminars, workshops.
yeah,
Networking opportunities,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that an economic development person
Right.
does a lot.
with key organizations.
Right,
okay,
I like, you know, one of the things, when the person's in place, I'd love to go even to our current local businesses. Talk to all of them about, hey, what are your future needs, or what would you like to do, you know, do you know the funding sources? So this person, I picture being that person that can connect the dots with banks, or, oh, there's a program for this or that. I mean, one of the things with Eaton's is, everybody thought, oh, well, there's no money out there for. And then, of course, from FEMA, in my discussion with FEMA person, he's like, oh, no, they could go working waterfront. And there was some, mixed communications at the time that said, well, that's not really working waterfront, and the person said, well, they provide gas to commercial boats, not just recreational, right? They fix, and Sean's like, yeah, he goes, that's working waterfront. I mean, it's as simple as knowing that stuff too.
okay,
Are we going to be in the process of modifying the ordinances to allow for economic development? Because we don't really have any space in Castine
right.
for the development of any new businesses, and that's why I abstained when this came up to the vote, because unless we're gonna provide some way for economic development within the town, I questioned why we needed the economic development director, because, you know, you can say, well, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that, which is one thing. But we should be saying, we will do this, we will do that, and if we can't have, we don't have the space to do it, how do we accomplish that? And that was my concern right along.
Well, we,
Can I ask a question that's good? Well, actually, you go, because mine's gonna take us right off in the right field on the comp plan and everything else, but I
Well,
think
yeah,
it's a. thing we
that's
need
what I
to
was gonna
ask.
say, we do have on here that this person would be a member of the economic subcommittee of the conference plan implementation committee. And so I think this person could help that committee when they're rewriting small pieces of ordinance. Because the point of this committee is to do small changes to the ordinance at a time instead of one big huge.
Will some of
change.
those be ready for me?
They should.
Okay,
They should have some of those ready for me, they could have several. But we'll vote on them individually now, not for the whole, we don't wanna lose the whole plan. So,
well, that's what happened the last time.
yeah, and we're not gonna do that again.
So let me ask you this, so whether it's talking to the committee members or talking to the harbor committee, talking to Sean, talking to people around town thus far. I know that we have a lot of buildings in town, everybody seems to be mostly worried about the form, what they look like. And then the challenge is, oh, couldn't they have a business in there, or couldn't they have apartments in there, whatever? Has this town ever looked at changing our Euclidean zoning, right, which is like businesses must go here. Industrial must go here, this is right to form-based codes. The form-based codes, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they say, look. we don't care necessarily what goes in there, but you must provide X amount of parking and you must look like this, okay? And because that's what people often worry about is Euclidean zoning, a lot of times you'll have like, let's say, 4 great Victorian homes and some commercial developer comes in and says, well, that's in the commercial zone. That'd be great to have that in there, but it doesn't work for us. We're gonna rip it down and then you get the classic ugly Rite Aid sitting there, you know, stuff like that. So under form-based code, you're like, look, whatever you put there has to look like this. Okay, it must look like 3 of these Victorian built, whatever it is. So that's something that maybe, it sometimes loosens up in a community that doesn't have a lot of space or perceived space. Actually can change that dynamic to create spots where people normally wouldn't have thought, yes, you can do that there. And it takes away the worry of what's it gonna look like when it's done. You already know that. So back to the article though, now that I'm off my little soapbox. I've never had a town that's gone form-based codes, but we've looked at it.
Yeah, I don't know if it would work, but okay, so, you can make that change to the
Yeah.
top bullet, and then I can spell the word working
Yeah.
correctly on the bottom bullet, and then we'll be good.
Okay,
Yeah, so they need that like right off. It's-
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
all we have to give to do is the if approved, right? And then
Yeah.
I'll get her the other one.
right, the fiscal note or whatever language is.
right.
Yeah. So 40, not 47, that would be yearly cost, 23.5 is what you're looking at going into that spot.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the description, you gotta better break it down in the note to say that's gonna be 18.5 for salary and 5,000 for
Yes,
various expenses and training and whatever.
yes, well, we have now that it's, oh, in the note on the,
Right, underneath, that's what Gordon was talking about, was that fiscal note, so if you say this is for a 6 months position.
oh, okay.
With a salary of X and Y,
Oh, it's
Either
either a
or
salary or
does
an
it-
hourly rate.
yeah, or
Okay,
whatever
so-
that,
That
right?
hourly rate would be a better way to
Yeah,
express it.
okay.
Okay, so the note would say, this is an hourly rate of. what's
20.50.
20.50,
Something.
2015.
and
Yeah. it's-
a $5,000 budget for advertising.
Just say,
Right,
just
$5,000
expenses.
for-
Supplies, training,
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
Karen has those numbers.
Yeah.
yeah.
all right. Okay,
Okay, that should, make it so that the people understand it better. Because I'm sure there's gonna be some people who look at that and say, wow,
oh, yeah.
if we can make it so it's more
We wanna make it
clear.
transparent as possible, and clear, and be.
Okay,
Really, it should pay for itself in the long run.
well, it should,
That's what we're hoping.
and by the way, the visitor center is $12,000 a year. It has been for several years.
Okay.
Okay, now we're down to general discussion with the town manager.
Yeah, I don't have a heck of a lot. The biggest thing I have right now, let's see. Well, just so you know, with FEMA, apparently we put in an application for the water treatment center for. A generator for the facility and it didn't make it through. Well, it's been put in for this next round. So, and it looks like it's pretty favorable, so we'll see how that plays out.
Whether or not we get a grant, we should put a generator up there.
Yeah,
And we also need to put one out at the light.
I was just gonna say, I've heard that
Yeah.
too. So, maybe if we get this one, we can a couple together and maybe we get.
2 for 1.
Right, yeah, or 2 for, and 1 for a discount if we're lucky, right? Yeah. And then the other thing is, another FEMA related item is we need to find out we're gonna do with a connector dock, which I think is the dock between the harbor master build, the one that was basically looked like a xylophone and the
Right.
phone in the
It still
storm.
has nails sticking up, by the way.
Yeah, so we need to find out what we're doing with that, and I thought we were just gonna put flow through type of stuff there, but I heard maybe not on that spot, but I'm thinking that would dissipate the hammering that it took before. Or if it's gonna be something else, and then the other thing is, if we're not gonna do a gazebo, what we're going to do, and we need to find that out quickly, because they're putting that through. The hazard mitigation program, because it doesn't look like it's gonna go through on just the regular damage part, so. Of course, I know people have talked about similar like Dennett's had with the material that just provides some shade, you know, in the wind. You know how durable that is, like in the heavy winds, but I'm thinking that has holes or something in it to dissipate the wind going through, or one of the. Other things we've talked about is I've talked about, I guess, more than anybody else, is somehow if we put a gazebo back on there, it ought to be removable, so once the season ends, it could be picked up and moved back and set someplace else. How that would fit into the flow through, panels and stuff, I'm thinking you'd have to pull the panels out there. I know they've talked about putting similar to what we did with picnic tables to kind of, stretch the square PSI of each of the legs. Either that or the other thing I've looked at is, as a possibility, is like a pavilion. So it's not gonna have sides on it, but in that case, it could be attached to the side of the pilings that is there. But my only problem with that is I'm worried about. I don't know, I'm not a weather person, so I don't know about, or even ocean person, so I don't know about like. Is it the pressure of like a storm, the wind pounding up, and would that create almost a type of sail almost to like. Pull up on the decking there and actually hurt more than help, or actually start pulling the pilings. Out of the ground there, so that's my only problem with anything permanently attached now is that creates a. Upward sail to actually start.
No, that's a really good one. You know, my concern about the gazebo is just really small, and if you look at last summer, you know, people, you know, we had those umbrellas that weren't ideal by any. But, you know, people really want to be spread out, and the gazebo just offers shade for, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 people, and I just think that it's worth. You know, looking at other options. I mean, I know there was resistance to the wind cells. The beauty of the wind cells is you could have posts attached to the 4 corners. And you could stretch it, and you just in the fall, you just take it down. And, you know, and so if you had to if the gazebo's been replaced several times over the years, I mean, this would be okay, every 4 years or 5 years, we have to get a new shade cell, you know what I mean? And if you go to like gardening centers, they make them that are they're kind of woven and nice, you know, it's like almost being in a pergola.
Yeah,
The gazebo that was there. In talking with people in Castine, it has about 50% of the people want it back and 50% want something, so we're in that situation, but. I think the dock is underutilized without it there. Because the tables and the tents are around the edges, they're not in the middle, and the middle is where that building was. And it did seat a lot of people because it had benches on the outside and benches on the inside. I don't see it to be a problem to put it back. I think it's a good addition, but there are other ways to do that and. You know, to use that space, but right now it's basically wasted space on the dock.
yeah.
Right, could put more tables in the middle though, I mean.
Well, you could.
Came down to it.
You could, but that's the question, you know, what really should be done, and that's why I'm bringing.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm bringing it, because I need to know so that we can give them an idea and get some idea of what it's gonna cost.
Well, Henry made it the last time.
Yeah, and I've seen some pictures and stuff when together there.
But if we had more table space there, that might be good as well, and
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I think that might be fine, and maybe eventually in the overall plan, we put back a gazebo, and that might be 2 years, next year, whatever, but maybe for the interim, we leave it open and see how it goes for a little bit.
Then we're not gonna be able to use this grant, is what I'm saying,
Oh.
in that case, so if we're talking about doing. The sale type of thing, you know, then that's, I don't know what they call it.
I think they call them sun sales or something.
Yeah, okay, and then, cause all I can picture is in Auburn, they have that park that has them all over the place, and I know Dennis had some of those too. So that, or. Like I said, I think the gazebo works as long as we pull it off there, like it in the winter time, so when the town docks get pulled out. Cause sometimes, I don't know, I was thinking, maybe in the age, that they had one of the Teletubbies there that had a little round eye hook on its head thing, so you got that, and they just can pick it up and pluck it and put it someplace else, you know? Or some way of like
Yeah.
picking it up and moving it, and it doesn't have to be an actual hook on top, but it could just be the straps through, you know, 4 equal places to just pull it out. But, yeah, I don't know, but it's something we need to know sooner than later for this, cause they would like to have it last week, and I said, hey, we're not even ready, we've been waiting to see if you're gonna pay under the regular program for it, before we went crazy with anything else, like, what is it that we're gonna have, you know, or the coverage for the damage for it, so. Like, when I say sooner than later, I mean now, this isn't something we can spend meetings on forever. If we're not gonna do it, we're gonna just go status quo and see how things work out, and go down the road. Then you lose that opportunity, I think, for this funding, because at that point, it's still
I
longer.
mean, my guess is to rebuild it as it was, like, or you think it's 10 grand, 20 grand,
Well, it wasn't anywhere near that.
Yeah,
but I mean, okay,
they're looking at how do you make it more resilient.
Okay. okay.
That's one thing, is I wish you could put axles on it and little wheels, you know, that you can just wheel it in and drop it and, you know.
Actually, probably could do something like that,
I
though.
don't-
I know that Mark Pelletier expressed interest in this at the last go around, and he's asked to be included in this discussion this time. I think he's away right now, but he'll be back. I will text him and
Okay.
Thank
maybe you
you.
guys will look at what his ideas were.
Okay,
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I'd like to get the harbor committee's input, yeah,
Okay,
on what they think we should.
Yeah.
Liz?
Just one, yeah, I just think that over time, it's a very different feel to sit in that, to be in that gazebo than it is to be at a picnic table. It's like a bar where you can go singly and you can sit at the gazebo and then people will join you. And
Yeah.
it's more of a community thing, and I do think it's even used off season. But I do think it's worth putting it back for that very reason.
okay, then Derek, let's do it.
let's do it.
Well, I'd like to know what Mark's ideas are for it, though, I mean, if he's got some ideas to make it more resilient, that's what they're looking for.
Go-
That's what this grant's gonna end up being, you know, and putting it back how it is, they're not gonna get so excited about doing it.
Going back to your first question.
Yeah.
About the other part of the dock.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that the flow-through decking has enough support on the other part. I think you need to talk to Scott.
yeah, I mean, I thought he had some concerns whether or not that was good, but do they have heavier gauge?
I don't know.
Stuff, you know?
I don't know, but it does need relatively close spacing,
Yeah,
because it isn't strong unto itself, it's strong because of the support underneath.
and that docks, is that the one that isn't even attached, let's say, it's kind of, it sits on top almost?
Well, that's what the old one was,
Right.
and I don't know what the new one is. I haven't-
Somebody at the last hour meeting was talking about one of them, I don't know if it's that or if it's the. I don't know, what the dock that goes out to the ramp on that side,
That's the Acadia dock.
that's the case, so. That one looks like it's attached, but I don't know.
But I'm sure Scott has the information to make that decision.
Yeah,
I think flow-through decking would be great if we could put it there. It certainly would solve the problem of the uplift from the waves that we had this past winter. And hopefully this new decking will be tried. Not so much to destroy the rest of the whole waterfront, but to see if it works. And yesterday it almost was high enough to tie it. If there was waves yesterday,
I saw that.
it would have come up through the deck.
yeah, I know that.
May I just for my own understanding, okay, so Derek, you're going to talk with Mark Pelletier about ideas for the design, and then you're going to take those to Harbor, is that, or send those on to Harbor, or talk to Harbor about it as well and get their blessing? And
That's
then,
what I have in my notes,
Okay.
Martin Harbor Master,
thank you,
and then, for gazebo,
okay,
and see.
And I would talk to Xander's, because Xander's the chair of that committee.
Yeah,
Because the committee may have a different opinion than the harbor master had. And that's not a bad thing, it's just that they may have different opinions.
I'll talk to Scott and Xander on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, I think that's all I have. Right now. Well, actually, the RFP, if you guys have some changes based on today or anything else, I think we still have that, what we talked about earlier in there. I need to add a little bit more about the main maritime dock, but also the I think you might have all seen the red line one when I got together with Sean, because I said the one missing component is making sure this is everything, and you'll see that we, from my discussion with Sean, we just talked about adding a couple of clarification languages, but really the desired outcomes of the if you'd like, real quick, is basically goals and program elements, access public boat land, I'm gonna change that to say continued. Access for public boat launch, access through town parking lot to C Street and Main Maritime to the southwest. Find metrics for projected sea level rise strategies for mitigation, define metrics for project storm surge and strategies for mitigation, identify strategies for cooperation with adjacent property owners to act effectively with cohesion across the waterfront. That cohesion across the waterfront is one of the things we added. Present ideas to support a thriving business, residential, recreation, cultural community, maintain public access to current use, views, parking, cost analysis, repair, renovate, replace plan. The new part says to mitigate future impacts of climate change, rising sea levels. Consultant will provide a detailed and phased space redevelopment design. Once approved by the town of Castine, this design will be used to create a Castine Town Dock Financial Master Infrastructure Plan. Estimated cost of all strategies, suggested activities, and identifying funding sources, fees, taxes, loans, and grant programs. And then just before that, on the scope of services, just for people knowing, the first thing of this particular study would be ramp up meetings. First, it'd be public meeting or meetings, we'll have to find out. Public stakeholders discuss the issue to better understand the goals and objectives of the study, project meetings with town manager, selectman, harbor master, and then of course continued contact throughout, which was something we actually discussed already on that. And then the ultimate report would provide basically background review, assessment of existing conditions, synopsis of risk and opportunities related to the development, recommendations that address satisfied program element requests, which was what I discussed before. Prioritize list of short-term action items, timeline for long-term goals. And then it would also have conceptual plans and financial feasibility analysis. See section 3.7 above. which was the maintaining public access to current use, views and parking, cost analysis of repair, renovate, and replacement plan. And then examples, conceptual plans, potential site redevelopment alternatives that are reproducible in an accessible file format. Prepare financial analysis to evaluate the feasibility of redevelopment alternatives, and finally provide final study and accessible file format that can be shared with community members. So, and then that's basically the nuts and bolts of then the change that I made from the initial one that I sent out based on the harbor master meeting is we're actually putting the 50,000 right into it. Cause we figured, okay, we might as well use all the money, so if something comes in at 39,000, that doesn't quite work. Let's give everybody, okay, what can you do for 50,000, now give us that RFP.
Okay.
And then we got rid of the scoring criteria that talked about
Thank you.
50% budget, 50% this, and who would be on the
Yeah.
selection committee. I took that out, and you'll see that now I just base it on those various items of experience, expertise, past projects, team composition, education certificates and relevant degrees, and then references, of course. And then I just say the selection team may select one, some, or all of them for additional interviews before a decision was made, and we'll figure out the committee later on.
Now, is there something about coordinating with Maine Maritime Academy on their second phase?
So,
And their second phase is actually the land side improvement, which is also going to. And I don't know the time frame for this, but in order to accommodate sea level rise, they have to bring their land side up. And we have to bring our land side up. So coordinate in that we don't have a parking lot that's 3 feet lower than Maine Maritime Academy's area in time wise. It has to be done so that it all works together seamlessly.
and I think Gordon, in the harbor master language, and I'm glad you mentioned that, I think that's what they're trying to say. When it says access through the town parking lot to C Street and Maine Maritime to the southwest. I think they're trying to say that, but I think you're right, I think explaining that a little better.
Yeah.
Because if I was reading that, I wasn't exactly sure what it meant either, to a degree, but. I assumed that it was something to do with the word Maine Maritime, but the consultant is not gonna have any idea, so to clarify that. In there would be better to say phase 2 land portion of MMA dock land.
And it's really unfortunate that MMA chose to do the land side at a separate time from the dock. Because the dock would not have had to be extended as far as it is being extended if they had done the land side in conjunction with the dock.
Yeah, that's.
And it's really unfortunate that they were forced into doing that by someone who's no longer here.
That makes sense.
Thank you, Derek. Was there anything else?
Nope, that's it.
So can I just ask a question from a previous meeting? Derek, were you and Doug able to get together and talk about the situation at the mobile home park with Waldo's property at all?
Not yet, I did send him a copy of the RFP that I got out of Allenstown, I do need to. Get the figures still from Alvin on that, I talked to him, but he said he thought he had already sent some along, and I've talked to him like 3 times since, I forgot to say, no, nobody actually has an actual figure,
Okay,
so.
And Greg Bowden was gonna be approached to see if.
That's who I'm talking about, I did talk to him about it, and he said, oh, I think if you ask Sean and Karen, you may already have that, but.
Oh, okay.
We don't have it in writing, I think it was a verbal thing,
Well,
so I need to just ask them, hey, I don't have it, can you send me an email or something with it?
That'd be good.
They have an idea.
that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
It's just, I would like, you know, in the near future, to have like a work session where we could sit talk and talk to Doug a little bit more. I did take a trip out to his property. And I just, I mean, I don't have a clear idea of what it could be, but it's an opportunity. And I think that it would be good for us just to say, okay, what could it be? You know, is it something that is a public-private partnership? Is it something, I mean, I just think that given the dire need for affordable housing, it's a conversation worth having.
So Doug and I, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, Roberta shot me the name of Greg, who works at the Washington Hancock County Agency.
Yeah.
And I shot it back in email, I guess, yesterday or the day before. Unfortunately, I don't have your email addresses, so I wasn't able to copy it, but I did ask Roberta to forward it to anybody
I'll
that
forward it.
they thought would be interested. And then if I were allowed to just put in one more sentence.
Sure.
I wondered if when you have your town gown meeting, next week, if maybe you just don't ask the question of the academy. Because other colleges routinely do it, they partner. They build
Oh,
houses.
yeah, absolutely.
So it would make sense to, I did mention, Dan, I do know Greg Johnson, I do know the head of the board, Wayne Norton. Wayne Norton's father that approached me 20 years ago to build housing for the academy, but that's when I wasn't interested in doing it with somebody else.
So it's in everybody's best interest.
Yeah, housing is on everybody's mind right now.
Yeah.
Of course, it's funny you say that, because I was reading an article, I don't know what it was in, about how even upperclassmen now at colleges, because of the housing problem, are now staying in the dorms again, so they're
Yeah.
converting lounges and stuff into housing, because they're tripling up.
Well, so
So we were gonna have to triple up over here just because of the, in Curtis Hall, because of the renovations, right? But yeah, in other places they're tripling up also because,
but tripling up doesn't take care of all the students.
you know, it doesn't, you're right.
I would just like to refer back to the short conversation about businesses in town and zoning a different way that Derek brought up. And the fact that we don't have any place for businesses to grow. Castine is larger than On Neck. Castine is
Oh, yeah.
larger than that.
Off Neck
And
has
so-
a lot of space.
And Off Neck has a lot of space, but I think that many of us have a mindset that everything has to be on neck. Well, it can't be anymore, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to expand our thoughts about that. And then I think, oh my goodness, that would be sprawl. Well, we can figure that out. I think we need to look at the whole of Castine, not just on that.
And the ordinance changes that were proposed and shot down included
Oh, I
Off
remember,
Neck.
I remember.
And
that well.
unfortunately, that was a wholesale shoot down that I don't think needed to happen, because it totally ignored Castine's future as far as any kind of development went, and that was very unfortunate that happened.
And you know, and thank you for that, because I think that's important also, even when we talk about, okay, people worry about sprawl, where it's going to go. Then we create what we consider another town center or something like that, that will be a commercial area, someplace off Neck. That provides the services that are needed to encourage that development and make sure that it fits in with what's on Neck also, you know, so that gets rid of that concern of, is this just gonna be dropping the Fox Sports strip ball, you know, and no, I don't wanna see that here. But if that had the proper facade and character to it, that could fit very well in that area.
It could actually even be invisible from the street.
Right, exactly,
On a access road or something. There's a whole lot of ways it could be done,
yeah,
but, you know, unfortunately, in town Castine, there's not a whole lot of space available. Other than taking some of the existing buildings and allowing commercial type activity without changing the outside.
Right, Right, those are two options, or
Sure,
that could work together.
sure.
It occurred to me.
And that was really the whole part of that plan that was put together back then
Mhm.
and then destroyed in an instant.
I remember.
Yeah.
How did we do that? Destroy it in an instant, they voted. I know, we voted, I was part of the writing the plan, so I.
The so-called, at the time, Economic Development Committee, separate from the Economic
Yeah.
Development Director, chose to make a statement at that town meeting that basically was against any changes in the zoning.
Oh.
And they also took the money that had been voted on the town for an economic development director and moved that into providing advertising, basically, that supported only one business in town.
Amen.
But behind this.
Okay, yeah, and hopefully this time if we do it in small pieces,
Well, let's do
we'll
it.
get some changes. Oh,
Okay, anything else we need?
Hopefully, I'm on my fourth cord, okay? That darn Zoom, darn camera will be in the middle,
Good,
okay? I
good.
had, this time I had it working, but it looked like I was a robot moving around, so the sound was great. So now I have a new one that won't have as many splices in it like this one, and I
Right.
think, and I got it, it was also recommended like the last one from the Owl people. With Owl Lab, so we will see. Otherwise, I'm ripping my hair out, we gotta go down under and rip stuff up with a new thing.
I hope it works.
I do too,
People
'cause
want
I'm-
to see more than me.
The one thing I hate is playing around with like technology stuff and it's not quite working out, so you keep going back and then literally, I think I got bald spots in my head from ripping up my hair over these.
Well, as I told you last time, having it right there allows me to hide behind.
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
Very productive meeting.
motion to adjourn, is in order?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And so you know, it appears that the YouTube stayed connected, so